we have one item under other business, which is an update on the URA. Ms. Connolly is going to lead us through that.
Thank you, Chair Hitchen, and for the record, Mary Connolly, Council staff. As Chair Hitchen said, in this presentation, I'll be giving a monthly update on the Unified Regional Approach to Homelessness, which we also call the URA. Next slide. Starting off with some background as a refresher. Next slide. This is a very brief timeline of how we got here. The Pierce County's comprehensive plan to end homelessness, adopted in 2022, included a goal to create a unified regional approach to homelessness. There was an initial roundtable discussion with representatives from 13 jurisdictions in 2024. And based on that discussion, the Pierce County Council hired a third-party consultant, Uncommon Bridges, to scope, design, and implement a unified regional approach. Over the last year, Uncommon Bridges convened several groups to move this work forward. That included an elected leadership group, which consists of elected representatives from across Pierce County, a work group of government staff, and 3 task forces with broad participation by government, nonprofits, and community members. At their meeting on March 20th, the elected leadership group, or ELG, reached strong consensus on a URA design. And at the start of April, the Pierce County Council staff took the lead on next steps to implement that design. And I'll give the next couple slides go over that design in a little bit more detail before I move on to updates. Next slide. The vision of the URA is a unified regional approach to substantially reduce homelessness so that it is rare, brief, and non-recurring. Next slide. The URA will support alignment and coordination of participating governments' responses to homelessness in certain areas. In the first column of the chart on your screen, you'll see data standards and sharing, universal entry and assessment, and coordinated inclement weather policy. And these are 3 areas where governments will begin to align their policies this year. In the second column are other potential areas where the URA will support alignment in the future, such as regional advocacy, standard procedures, performance metrics, and contract requirements. There will be certain minimum requirements for governments who join the URA that are related to some of these activities, but a lot of these will serve as future options or opportunities for governments to pursue as they are interested. Next slide, please. And then a little bit about the URA's governance structure and staffing, again, based on the design that the elected leaders reached consensus on in March. The URA will be formally established via an interlocal agreement. Participation by governments will be voluntary. The URA will be governed by a board of elected officials representing participating jurisdictions. Pierce County will serve as the administering organization for the URA, including as the employer for URA staff. For the first 1 to 3 years, the annual budget is expected to be about $400,000 to $600,000 per year, primarily supporting employment of 2 to 3 FTEs. And the budget will depend on revenues from participating governments, with amounts based on the population of each jurisdiction living in Pierce County. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to move on to some updates to the project since my last update to Council in April. Next slide. On April 10th, Chair Hitchen and Executive Mello met with city managers and administrators from around Pierce County to provide feedback on, or for the city managers and administrators to provide feedback on the ELG's proposed design. At their meeting on April 27th, the ELG members reviewed that feedback, discussed adjustments to the URA design, and discussed next steps. So in the next couple of slides, I will be going over the outcomes from that ELG meeting. Next slide. One of the pieces of feedback that was received by the city managers and administrators is that there's a disconnect between the vision and scope of work. The vision makes it seem like the URA might be setting up a lot of programs, while the scope of work really focuses on coordination and system improvement. City managers and administrators also said it would be helpful to have an elevator pitch for what the URA is actually doing. And I think we've heard that question a lot throughout this process of what will the URA literally be doing. And so in response to this feedback, the ELG took a couple of steps. One step was creating a mission statement, which states how the URA will achieve its vision. So that mission statement is that the URA empowers Pierce County governments to choose locally responsive solutions to respond to and prevent homelessness while establishing a county-wide framework that supports coordination and efficient use of shared resources. Next slide, please. Even with this mission statement, there were still some questions around what will the URA be doing and how do we concisely describe it in one page. And so the ELG at their meeting also reviewed and provided feedback on a one-pager to describe what the URA will do in plain language. So the most up-to-date version of this document is included in today's packet. The audience for this one-pager is councils and governments in Pierce County. It might be adjusted a little bit more, but it's pretty up-to-date, the one that's in your packet. Next slide. At their meeting, the ELG also finalized a template for a resolution of intent that governments are encouraged to use to express their commitment to the URA. So this resolution does a few things: expresses the government's intent and commitment to launch a URA, directs staff to work with other governments to develop an ILA or interlocal agreement, and then while an ILA is in development, commit to making progress on certain activities related to data collection, homeless system entry, and inclement weather, and support establishment or expansion of at least one homeless intervention in their jurisdiction. And that resolution template and guidance are also in today's packet if you want to take a look at those. The ELG also supported the start of a roadshow to government councils so that Chair Hitchen and council staff, mostly myself, can inform governments about the URA project, answer questions they have, and encourage them to consider adopting a resolution of intent to show their commitment to this work. Next slide, please. And now my next few slides will be talking about next steps. Next slide. So the first roadshow presentation was to the city of Edgewood last week on Tuesday at their study session. The council was fairly engaged, I thought, and asked lots of good and thoughtful questions. Next week, we will be presenting to the city of Fife and PCRC. And then since this presentation was put together, Chair Hitch and I have also scheduled a presentation at the city of Gig Harbor on June 11th, and that will be a co-presentation between Chair Hitch and myself and Shay Smiley, who is the city of Gig Harbor staff. Chair Hitchen and myself are also in the process of reaching out to other cities that have had representation on the ELG to schedule additional presentations. And then the next ELG meeting is next week on May 21st. At this meeting, the ELG will finish reviewing feedback from city managers and administrators that we didn't have time to get to at the last meeting and make some final adjustments to the URA design as needed. Next slide. Once a critical mass of governments have signaled their intent to join the URA by adopting a resolution, and critical mass is yet to be determined exactly what that means, but Chair Hitchen has suggested perhaps 5 governments, including Pierce County. There will be some additional next steps for council staff, so that will include supporting governments to implement coordinated activities related to data collection, homeless system entry, and inclement weather, and then beginning interlocal agreement negotiations with those governments. Next slide. And there are also a couple of next steps for this council to consider. The council will consider adoption of a resolution of intent to support the URA. It was developed with that same template that is in your packet today, but is filled out for Pierce County specifically. This resolution will be introduced at council tomorrow and will be scheduled for a Health and Human Services Committee meeting on June 19th, or excuse me, May 19th.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, May 19th. The council will also need to consider how to use remaining ARPA funding for implementation of the URA. Because the council and Uncommon Bridges decided to mutually end our contract as of May 1st, 2026, there's about $288,000 of ARPA funding left for URA implementation. As described by Director DeMuth at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week, the Department of Finance and Enterprise Services recommends reassigning this funding to certain expenditures funded with ARPA interest and then reallocating that ARPA interest to this project. If council approves that recommendation, then it would have about $288,000 of ARPA interest available, and that's more flexible than ARPA funding. It would be available through the end of the biennium and also be a little bit more flexible in how it could be used. So one way that council might consider using this funding, which has been brought up by a couple of council members, is to pay for legal and staffing costs for governments to participate in URA implementation and get that work moving that they have committed to in the resolution of intent. And so council staff are working with Chair Hitchen to prepare communication to city managers and administrators to assess the feasibility and usefulness of that option. Next slide. The website unifiedregionalapproach.com has been transferred to council from Uncommon Bridges. And so that also has dates for upcoming meetings and past meeting materials for elected leadership group and staff planning group meetings. And will also be updated soon with upcoming dates for these monthly Monday study sessions, as well as our roadshow presentations. So next slide. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Connolly. Gonna pause here and I have two asks. One, if you could read through the elevator pitch is what we keep calling it, but that one pager that kind of explains it, and think about, is there anything that you're missing thinking about the communities that you represent? If you feel like this is a question they're going to hear in such and such community and it's not articulated. So if you could read that and then provide that feedback to Merritt. We can't fit everything because we're trying to really keep it on one page, but we are trying to capture what the work is. And if there's wonders, it will help us kind of think about how best to communicate. The second is, Councilmember Morrell, you brought up a potential idea around using these existing dollars to potentially source or support our smaller jurisdictions on working on the development of the ILA and training and that kind of thing. One of the reasons moving it to ARPA interest is now we can. When it was under ARPA, it was, I'm just going to say, for all practicality, impossible. It would be, but we're going to, I guess a wonder I have for you, we think we want to start with the city managers and ask if this is something they think would be helpful before I tell their elected officials who may glob onto something that the city managers go, whoa, no, we don't know how to do that. And would love thoughts on if you think that's a good path. We just, the city managers in these smaller jurisdictions are the ones that are going to have to manage this. So it was a curiosity and you brought it up. So don't know if anybody has thoughts. Councilman Morrell.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's fine. Find out what type of capacity they have, and if they don't have capacity, what it's going to cost to get the data put together. So that's fine, however it works. You know, the city managers are the ones that end up with it. So the council is just, yeah, it's a great idea to do it. Oh, okay.
Yes.
A little tougher. So anyway, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. We will stay on that path. Any additional questions or comments on the URA? Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. And thank you to everyone involved in this transition. I have two hopefully really quick questions. Curious about the resolution of intent language. If there's been any discussion around creating, I'm going to say template for lack of a better word, to ensure that there's consistency in language across the jurisdictions.
Yes, in your packet is that template, and you'll see that there are certain kind of blank spaces for jurisdictions to fill out. There's also an accompanying set of guidance with some data numbers that those jurisdictions can plug in, and some more information on certain homelessness interventions that they might consider supporting or expanding in their jurisdiction.
Thanks, Mary. I did not scroll down on that.
No
Appreciate
worries.
it. And then my second question, I know this has come up a few times and I don't think we're necessarily ready for this. But if there's been any updates or discussions around looping in special purpose districts and how to work with them, knowing that they also play a critical role in a lot of the homeless services. And I'm thinking fire districts, park districts, school districts, or if we're just not thinking about that until we get that critical mass.
This has been a question that's come up specifically in regards to school districts and the health department, and if they should be able to also join this effort. And the elected leadership group has maintained that the governing board should include just like cities and the county tribal governments. There might be a role for those special purpose districts in a little bit more of an advisory capacity, or perhaps a non-voting role of some sort, but that hasn't been quite fleshed out yet. I'll see if Chair Hitchin has any other thoughts on that.
I think because it doesn't exist yet and we don't have governments on board, trying to bring in additional quasi-governmental or additional governments seemed, I'm going to say, daunting. And so we wanted to get county and city buy-in, get it stood up, get it moving forward. And then what do we do? Because those would be, I think, additions to, in a good way, but could make it more complicated in its infancy.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be premature, but I think there again, the challenge that I'm starting to hear from my cities is basically the outfall of what's happening up in King County with their URA. Would it be advantageous at this time to put in some kind of transparency audit, accountability of the funds spent, whatever nature we have to do to make sure we don't look like King County? I think we need to put it in up front, because there again, if we can show that there is going to be accountability within the dollars spent, I think that might get you a little more mileage with some of these jurisdictions on wanting to pull the trigger based on what's happening in King County.
Thank you. I will add, we've been really clear since the beginning that we are not building what King County, that was actually even at the very first meeting way back years ago, before King County had its issues. We said we were doing what's right for Pierce County. And I think I started the last ELG meeting with I'm not going to ignore that what's going on in King County. Just going to remind you, that's not what we're doing. But to your point, I feel like that would end up in the ILA as part of that work, so figuring out that transparency. Are you saying you would want to see it in the resolution? Because the resolution,
I would say we might as well set the bar at the beginning within the resolution to say it needs to be part of the ILA. Because the first thing that's going to happen is they're not going to know the difference between King and what Pierce is doing. So if there's something that we could put in there up front, I'd prefer that.
okay. happy to think about what that looks like. And we're going to be the first government taking this up. So, but we've also shared the template out with everybody. So happy to kind of ponder what that could look like and see what makes sense. Thank you for flagging it as a question. We're going to go to Councilmember Kruger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am curious in the sense where we don't know, what the future holds, and if an entity cannot financially live up to the expectations or the agreement, then what? Is there a way for them to say, we really wanted to do this, but we can't? What is their out?
So we have similar language with the RCC ILA, where we've got ways for people to exit, both a jurisdiction to exit or for the whole thing to be dissolved, and that would be developed as part of the ILA. There would be a exit path created.
Is that already drawn up?
We haven't. Until we have a few people. So I don't think the county should just write the ILA and bring it to the group. So part of the thinking is get a group of city and towns that have said yes to work on the ILA. We'll write the base since we'll have the employees, but that would be part of it. So you would definitely want to have the exit ramp, like what's the distribution of any funds that are pooled, like all of those things, and people. Lawyers will figure that out for us.
Okay, because I just don't want it to have to be an act of God for somebody to make a commitment and find out that it's not healthy for their city, and that it isn't that difficult to change. So thank you.
Yeah. Additional questions or comments, or Ms. Connolly, do you have anything to add to my comments?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Not seeing any other lights.